Okay, we are live. Today we're gonna go through lesson 4 material that we've been going through this week: objects, inheritance, and then creating our own objects. And going through the tasks that we had 2 tasks this week. So I'm just gonna create an HTML file and a JavaScript file for it. So just a basic HTML file with the emmet abbreviation for script src, and here it's just stream5.js, and let's create a new file called stream5.js. And let's have a look at the course material before we start actually working on the tasks themselves. So we had objects, built-in objects, prototypes, prototype inheritance. So pretty much everything in JavaScript is an object. We've been using objects since day 1. For example, console is an object and log is an object method. Objects are key value pairs of data. You can define your own objects, or you can use built-in objects provided by the language itself. Properties in objects are called keys. Methods or functions are called methods. And both of these live in the scope of the object. So for example, a string is an object and it has a length property, and that length property is tied to the string itself. So if I would copy paste this code and open up my console, we would see that the length indeed is 15. If I would store that string into a variable, then I could check all the properties that this string has, and that what are interesting for today are the prototypes. So here you see we don't actually get the prototypes. What I would need to do is string.prototype, and now we get all the prototype methods and properties that we have, and the prototype itself is an object as well. So let's create some of our own objects before we jump deeper into prototypes and the tasks. So we can create an object with curly braces. For example, this would now be an object. It has no properties, it is empty, but it has a prototype, which is an object. So let's create a variable called myObject, which will have no content. Now, if I look at the object, there's nothing on it, but I can start adding values to it. And so forth. And now, if we look at my object, you see value 1, value 2, value 3. And you see that we have the prototype here as well. So we can create objects that are empty, or we can create objects that have some value, such as the person, and now I can call person first name, for example. And I can change the name to be something else. And now if we look at person, we notice that the name has changed. We can also create methods for objects. So if I would copy paste this, now we have object called SumDog, or variable SumDog containing an object. And if I would say SumDog.bark, we would see that it says woof. It's a small dog, it's less than 8, the weight is less than 8, and the keyword this is interesting part here. It's referring to the object itself. So it's a small dog, it's less than 8. So that this keyword refers to the object itself, and a method is defined with the function keyword. So you see that method is actually a function. I've added a comment here that this keyword does not work with arrow functions. So if we go here and we see the arrow function here, so you would see that this does not work. So I'm just copy pasting the values here, and I'm gonna remove this comment out. And now we have SumDog2.bark. So you see it's going to this branch of the if statement, even though it should go to the first one. As you see, the weight is 7. It's checking that if the weight is less than 7, then go to this branch. But it's actually going to this branch because window this variable refers to the window object, and window does not have weight. Therefore, this statement cannot be true, so it goes to this statement. So as you see, it goes to this statement here. So be careful when using methods and functions, because the arrow function will keep the context of this variable. It will take it from where you define it, where you call it. In this case, we're calling it from the window, so that this context is window object. So be careful with this keyword. In other languages it's a bit more simpler. That this keyword will point into something else. Okay, so here we have a different way of defining an object. This is the function constructor or constructor function. Not so much used in JavaScript, at least not in the last 10 years or so. More like a Java feature than a JavaScript feature. So if I would copy paste this line of code, so you should be able to access all of this code as well from GitLab. And if I call if I initialize a new instance, the new keyword here tells us that create a new instance of the dog function. And now Harry dog will be an object of type dog. The type comes from the function name, and it will have key value pairs of data here. So we have key and value, key and value, key and value, key and value, and the last one being the value being a function, therefore the property is a method. So now if I say Harry dog.bark, you will see it says woof because we have defined here that the weight is 7. And similar to the other one, it would go to this branch then. So be careful with the this keyword. On this case, the this keyword will work because we have used the this. We have used the function keyword here, even though we have arrow function here. So that this will point to the function itself. And if we say this.name or whatever, then we create a new object. Notice there's no return statement here as well. But the variable itself will have content. That's because we have initialized new instance of dog with these values. Instance is something we haven't really gone through on this class, but once you start working on the Java courses, instances and initializing new instances and constructors and all of those will become clear to you. Okay. And we've been using built-in functions or built-in objects from day one. Strings, arrays, numbers, and so forth. They're all objects. Console we've been using from day one. That's an object as well. Document is an object. Event is an object. Math, date, location, and so forth. They are all objects that have some properties and some values. For example, we see here math, it returns an object. You see key value, key value, key value, key value, and so forth. And the 3 dots telling us that there's more content here. So you see the curly braces, they mean that this is an object. And then we can access any of these values that we have here. There's lots and lots of methods, and then there's some properties. This might be handy when you're working with some mathematical code. If you're writing some code that needs to use pi, for example. It's not the most accurate pi, but it's accurate enough. And same goes with the other ones as well. And then we have all these methods. And if you remember the type of keyword, we can now check the type of math. So you see it's an object, string, well that's a function for some reason, number, function, date, function. These should be, well they are objects, it's just that the type of is not perfect. But as you see, we can say boolean.prototype. So you see it's actually an object because we have the dot. If we have a dot, then we know that anything before the dot is an object, and we are accessing the property of that object. So let's go forward to the prototypes. We've been working with prototypes a lot this last week. JavaScript is a prototype-based language, unlike Java, which is an object-oriented language. Prototypes are the mechanism by which JavaScript objects inherit features from one to another. And pretty much everything is an instance of object. So we can create our own Boolean. Let's create a Boolean prototype. No, that's not a good idea. Let's use string, that's more fun. String prototype hello equals function, and let's just make it wrap the word we are looking for in hellos. So let's see, world hello, hello world hello, hello world is hello world hello, or hello world. We can do all kinds of cool stuff. Let me create something else. String prototype repeat. Oh, there seems to already be a repeat, so let's try it out. But we could create our own repeat prototype. So string prototype my own repeat if function times, so how many times we want to repeat. Then let's do a for loop. Let I be 0, I is less than times I plus plus, and let's initialize an empty string, and let's concatenate the string many times. So empty is this, and then return empty. So this is a bad variable name now, so let's just say result and result. So now my own repeat, and let's say 10 times, it should repeat it 10 times. So let's see, did I make it correctly? Yes. So we have created our own function which will repeat the text many times as we want. So programming, this is like pretty much the same stuff as you learned from lesson 2, just a basic for loop, and then lesson 1 string, and lesson 1 increment operator. So I'm in this case, because it's string, I'm concatenating and adding the value to this variable. So I'm changing result variable to be or appending the string into the result this many times. As long as this is true, we will append. I'm just checking if there's any comments right now. So I'm muted. That's nice. Hopefully not muted anymore. Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry that I was muted. I'm sorry about the background noise as well. So, not sure how long I was muted, but I've been working on these tasks now. Hopefully I wasn't muted for too long. Okay, so we have person 1, person 2 here. We create a persons array into which we add those people, those persons into. Then I have the UL query selector here, and I'm looping through all of these people and adding them to the website. Okay, so before I'm gonna continue to task 2, I'm gonna create a function that will do this content for us, so we don't have to repeat it all over again. So I'm just gonna have function add person to page, and let's have variable person there, and let's remove this code, put it here. I'm gonna remove this one as well and put it underneath here. That's good. And now I have created a reusable function, and I can say here add person to page person. And if I save, nothing should change. That's good. So let's try test. So we see the word test coming from our function right now. So that's good. So we could loop the content using the for off loop, or we could loop the content using the normal for loop. Let I equal 0, I is less than persons.length, and let's increment I by 1. So we have a for loop with 4 steps, four parts. We have the initialization, we have the condition, and we have the step or the increment here, and the body itself. And I could here say add person to page, persons, and then the current ID. And now you see that it's working, it's adding them twice. Or I could use the while loop, while I is less than persons.length, add person to page, again persons and the current index. And I need to define I here, let I equal 0 and I plus plus. So we have added now using 3 different ways. So I'm moving into more complex ones. So let me put in a bit simpler ones in the beginning. So we have the persons array here, and we remember that persons or the array have prototype methods, one of them being for each. So this is a method that will perform the specified action for each element in an array. So we define a callback function, and that callback function will be called once per each element in the array. So I'm going to define a callback function. The callback function will get a person value, and now we can call add person to page person. So you see we're getting more and more people into this, even though we only have 2 people. I'm gonna show you one more simpler way of doing it. So persons dot for each, and as we have defined a function add person to page that only takes one parameter, one argument, which is the person itself, and you notice that we're repeating a bit here, person, so forth. So I can just say add person to page, and that's all I need. So now I'm looping the persons array by using the for each, and I'm referring to a function that we created. And now this content is called every time when this function is called. So you notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different times we have called this function. So instead of repeating this code many times, we can just have single reusable function that we can call. So I'm gonna remove the rest of this because we don't really need this anymore. And now we have simplified this a bit. I'm gonna also move the function to the beginning of the page of the source code, just because I want to define functions in the beginning. Then I define variables, and then I start calling the functions and calling the variables. So I'm gonna move into the task 2, which is continuing from task 1. When you've been working on this, hopefully you have created separate files for these. I created separate files for these as well, but on this stream I'm just gonna continue on this file. So we're gonna add these input fields into the HTML page. We can just copy paste these. Don't really care what they contain at the moment. The only thing is that we just need these fields to be here. And now when the input fields are filled and at the bottom is clicked, a new person object is created and added to the existing persons array. So we have the array here, and we need to add values to it when we click here. So let's create the adding function first. So function, I'm just gonna add it on the top. Function, add person, persons, push person. We could also call it this on the event listener, but let's make this a bit simpler. And now let's hook into this button. So const button equals document query selector button. So nothing major, should be pretty simple in a way. We've been using query selectors. You could also use different selector methods, but let's continue with the query selector because it's simple. So a button, let's add an event listener to it. So we're adding an event listener which will receive two arguments, one being the click and one being a function which receives an event, and that event we might or might not need it, so let's keep it there for now. So next up we need to read the content of these input fields because we need the name, age and country. Before, let's define an empty object called person, and in the end we will call add person. And now let's try to get these values. So we will have 3 inputs. So const inputs is document get elements by tag name input, or we could also use query selector all. It's a bit simpler. Those two are the same. And now let's get the first input. Input 1 is inputs and index 0, and input 2 and input 3. Input 2, input 3, 1 and 2. So 0, 1, 2. We don't need to care about the placeholder values or anything, we just care about the type, which is the input itself. And now let's name these a bit better. So we see the first one is name, so let's call it name. Then let's call this age, and let's call this country. Now if I will console log, if I will console log, for example, name, and as I save and I go here, I click add, you see name, but it's actually not the, if I type something, you see it's not showing me the name. So we need to define, we need to call the value, which is dot value, and now we should get a name here. Yeah. So let's do that same thing on all of these. Now we have name, age and country, so let's just use these variables, or even better, we can just say person.name equals input 0 value, person.age, person.country. And now as I add person here, it adds it to the list. But we are not doing anything with the list yet. We can check that it has been added here. That's good. So let me then print it out as well. So we can call, we can skip adding it to the list because we don't care about adding it to the list at this point. So I can just say add person to page. So Juha and Finland, and now it's adding it to the page. And now you notice that this function is doing the same thing as this function. And let's double check the requirements. Okay, it's added to the existing persons array. So we need to actually add it to there. So let's keep it. There persons push. And now whenever we push, we need to clear this content and rewrite this. Because if we would now call this, and I add Juha here, you see it's adding it multiple times. So we need to first clear this input UL inner HTML is empty, and now as I add person, it's clearing it. So let me create a function clear list, and we can just move that functionality there. Clear list. Now it's a bit simpler again. Good. And now what we would also want to do as a secret bonus, let's clear these values. let's call reset form. Let's create function called reset form. And what we need to do is find these inputs again. So let's get all those inputs. Inputs for each function input. And let's just reset it. Input value equals empty. So now, as I put something here, it adds it to the list, and it's also clearing. So what I'm doing here is I'm writing code iteratively. So trying out different things, adding functionality, trying out testing things, adding functionality. Okay. And it turned out we don't need the event at all, so let's remove the event. That's good. And there was a requirement about checking, validating the input. So we need to check at least age, that age is a number, and that name and country is valid. So let's start with name, country, and age existing. If person dot age, let's check it this way. So if person name is empty, or person dot age is empty, or if person dot country is empty, then alert input data invalid. This message could be a bit better, but it's okay for now. So let me just see if I just type in empty. So you see that it's giving me this error, and it's also adding an empty row here. And that empty row is something we don't actually want. So let's make sure that person is only added if the if statement here, if this does not match, then only then will we go here. So now if I press add, we will see this alert, and nothing should be added here. So that's good. Okay, so now we need to put something here, and Finland. Now we need to also check that I have to put a number here as the age. So let's put an else if person age, and we let's show some sort of error message. Alert age is not a number. So how we check this is by adding checking that is it not a number. So is not a number, and now if I click here, input data invalid, that's the first. Okay, that's good. Let's add values. And now if I press add, it says age is not a number. Okay, let's put some age here, and now it has added this person here with that age. What if I want to add some new person with negative age? So let's see. So we could improve this. So else if person age is less than 0, So now if I put Juha, nothing happens. If I put -1, it says age cannot be negative. That's good. And if I put 0, it works. And if you want to check that nobody who is over 150 years old cannot be added. So let's see. Juha, 151 and Finland. So now it's saying that too old cannot be added. Okay. So now we have lots of functionality here. So let's simplify this a bit. I'm gonna move this. This is a function, so I'm just gonna move it out. I'm gonna give it some name. Function, as you see, it's telling me that it's missing a name. So handle click. That seems good enough. And therefore our code here is now super simple. It just refers to this function here. And now we can start even simplifying this. So let's create new helper functions. Function get person from input, and we can just remove that part of the code. Return person, and we could reuse this if we wanted to. Const person equals get person from input. Let's make it a function call. So now it's only the name of the function is the, so this person would now be the function itself. But now we make it a function call and we will get some values from here. Let's try it out. So we should have still behavior that works. Good. 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 And now it adds. Good. So we've simplified this a bit already. We can simplify it even further. So let's add validation function, validate person. And here let's pass the person object. And we can copy paste pretty much all of this. We don't want the add person to be here. So let's, in this case, return true. And here const is valid. Validate person if is valid, then add person. And let's put return false here. So if any of these matches, it goes to here. If none of these matches, it goes here. So as we click, it works. And then I want to simplify this. So function person proper. So let's just check if any of the person properties are empty, and we remember that these are properties. So let me just return this. If person properties are empty, person, then we're gonna alert this message. So now as I click, it should say input data invalid. So let's say person data cannot be empty. And as I press add, it gives us the new error message. So we have simplified this a bit now. So the handle click is super simple. The logic in the bottom is super simple as well. And we will only click, we will only add person if that information is valid. And because we started to get a lot of if statements, if else statements, it was getting a bit messy. So that's why I moved the logic into a new function, and then I can here continue improving this validation. And this function does not now need to know the details of the validation, it just needs to know if it's returning true or false. We could also make these into booleans, so all of these would be one boolean, but then it would be a bit pain to get the alert message. So let's keep this as it is for now. So let's see what else. Okay, good. So we have now implemented everything from task 1 and task 2. So I'm just gonna simplify this even a bit more, hopefully. So we don't need this person object actually here. Let's remove that. And instead I'm gonna define variables called name, age and country, and let's return a new empty array, and let's start putting values into it. Name is name, age is age, country is country. And as you noticed, it's still working. And if I try adding Juha 40 Finland, it should still work, and if you look at the persons, it should populate it correctly. Good. This is now a string. We don't really want it to be a string. So we would need to convert that into a number, but for this statement, this check to work, we need to keep it as a string for now. In HTML, we don't really know if this is a string or number, if this is a string or number, so let's just keep it a string. But in real life, that would have to be a number here as well. So we would have to have the validation already here. So that would add a bit more complexity. But if you've done JavaScript before and ES6, this is something we haven't gone through on this course. Just gonna go through it briefly. ES6 object. I think it's called object restructuring. No, not that one. It was the other one. I always forget the names. It was the other one. Just can't remember the name. Object literal. So we can have. We don't need to define. Okay, I can't find it right now. Can't find the name for it. But we can initialize these objects as the variable itself is the same as the key. We can simplify this even further. And this would work now as well. So this is a shorthand syntax for this. As you see, this is a bit more code and there's lots of repetition, And as developers, we hate repetition. So the designers of the language have made it so that we can, if the variable we are assigning has the same name as the key, we can just leave out the key or the name, and we can use this shorthand behavior.
Ihan hyvin se menee. Ei se niinku, ei ne kaikilla ollut ihan puhdat timanttia tänäänkään. Oli kyllä ihan hyvin, siis oli tosi hyviä.
Okay.
Mut kyllä mä uskon, että pärjätään.
Let's see if there's something else we could do here.
Joo.
Well, I could create a function to clear node. Node is some value, node value is empty. Clear node value. And we can remove this, and it should still work as we add new values here. Tool, okay. So we simplified this a bit as well. So we could go on and on, simplifying, refactoring, iterating. And this is usually how I'm just gonna remove that and keep it like this, so there's no confusion. This is how you work with software. You iterate, you improve piece by piece. You incrementally improve the code piece by piece until there's no benefit anymore to improve that code. And I think we are now getting to the point where we don't get much benefit anymore from improving this code. So maybe it's time to stop the stream for now at this point. Remember that you have the assignment 2. I'm just gonna open it up here. Assignment 2 deadline is this Sunday, and it's a strict deadline, so you cannot return it after the Sunday. So go through this material. This is on Oma. Look at the tutorial and create this this kind of game. It's a bit much, but yeah, I believe you can do it. Hopefully you have already started, and return it to Oma afterwards. But as it's strict, you cannot return it after the deadline. Okay. So I'm gonna stop the stream today at this point. I'm gonna wish you good luck with the stream, with the assignment 2, and we'll see you on Friday. Okay, there's a question. Is it possible to narrow down the home country as invalid data if the person doesn't put real country name? Yes. Yes, let's do that. So validate country. Let's create a function called validate country. That was a good question. So let's create validate country, and that function gets an input argument as country. And let's create here a list of countries that exist. We could have the list here inside the function. Const countries equals some sort of list. That list is string, contains strings of countries: Finland, Sweden, Denmark. You can decide what kind of countries exist. You can make your own countries as well. Let's start with looping first. So for let I equals 0, I is less than countries dot length, and then increment I by 1. And now let's get the current country. Const country in list is countries and I, so at the current index. Let's create here const is valid country, and let's say false. Let's return this. So now we return, that has to be left, of course, sorry. So we will return if the country, we will return whether or not the country is on this list. And because we used the keyword country here already, we cannot use it here because we now have to do a comparison here. If wait a minute, let's see how we could do this. If country in list is same as country, let's define is valid country to be true. And now let's check here. Else if validate country person.country. So now we're checking if this is true, but let's say we want to check it's false. So if not validate country, let's rename this. It doesn't make much sense. Else if not validate country. Else if is valid country. So if not valid country, alert country does not exist. And now if we write in here Juha 48 and some country that's not on the list, hello, it should now say hello, country does not exist. And let's put Finland here. We know that Finland is here as well, and I press add. It says country does not exist. So we have a bit of problem here. That's because JavaScript is case sensitive. So now it works. So let's check that both this and these are lowercase, for example. So we format them in the same formatting. To lowercase, to lowercase. So now I'm just gonna give you an example here. To lowercase, you see it lowercase is the letters. So now now we should be able to add. Notice here that after this we will continue checking all the countries. Let's use break. So after, if this is true, if this statement is true, let's break out of this loop. We don't need to check any more countries because we know this country is valid, it exists on the list. We don't need to check any of these other countries anymore. And let's improve the alert a bit. Country, country, person, country does not exist. So So we would see person country blah does not exist. Country America does not exist. And so forth. But only when it's visible in this country. And we could do the same thing for person names and everything. Validate them as much as we want. But now that we have the function validation here, or the person validation, we can improve this as much as we want, and we don't need to change any of this content, and this will just care about the Boolean value coming, and it doesn't care about the details of the implementation that we have here, and we can split this as much as we want. I can even change this to be return false here. If this makes any sense. Return true. But now you see that we're getting a lot of repetition here. But this should also work. Person data cannot be empty. But as you can see, it's repeating a lot now. So let's just keep it as it was with the else if. So it's a bit more condensed, a bit more simpler, but not. This is not simple to read, but it's a bit simpler. We're not repeating return false many times. There are many ways to improve this function, for example. But it's something that takes time, and in real product you will most likely then have that time to improve this. So I'm just gonna clear this just a bit up. Let's change these countries. Or we could also check this in different ways, because an array will have some methods, some prototype methods. One of them being includes. This is something we used already in one assignment. So what we need to do is to check that if that country includes on this one. So if countries function, countries includes function, let's see, I think there was, okay, includes country, but this might lead into some issues, as it's not now case sensitive at all. So we would need to do some things to the countries list. So let's just say Juha and Finland. It says Finland does not exist. Okay. We could lowercase these. We could make sure that these are lowercased. That's one option. And then to lowercase here as well. Juha, Finland. Now it should be able to edit. But what if we want to have countries like this? Then it's a bit more difficult. So I'm gonna show you one thing that we haven't gone through on this class at all, which is the map function. Map function will call a defined callback function and return a new array. So we will change the content. We will iterate through all of the values, then return. For each value, we will return a new value, which will create a new list. For this, we give a function. And now let's just return value to our case. And now this should work. Good. So we can skip this for loop, for example. But I'm gonna keep the for loop because we haven't gone through the map at all before. But I just want to show that there's many different ways of simplifying this code. Even we could simplify it even further like this. But I'm gonna keep the for loop that we had earlier because it's something we have used already, so it's familiar for us. We could also move this countries list. It doesn't make much sense to have it here, so we could create a new function. And now const countries is country list. And here we could now add more countries, remove countries, and this function doesn't need to know anything about the content of this country list. So now we have created this like modular code, which is does not care about the implementation details of different parts of the code, and we can change them relatively safely. We can change the implementation relatively safely. I'm gonna check if there's any more questions. That was a good question, thank you for that. We can do the same thing for names as well, and any kind of things we want to do. Let's check one more thing. Let's check the length of a name. Person.name.length. So here you can see the chaining happening. There's 2 dots. Length is less than or equal to, well, it cannot be 0 because we're already checking on this function. So let's just say that if it's longer than 20 characters, for example, there might be names that are that long, but let's just say that this system does not allow that. Name is too long. So let's see if we get something here. Name is too long. Okay. And now we can. Now these numbers are called magic numbers, so we can remove them, and let's create. Let's create it inside the function itself. Const max person name length is 20. Now this number conveys a bit more meaning through well-named variable name, and let's say const max person age
Kävisikö sulle Twin Peaksin katsominen lauantaina kello 1?
150.
Okei, hienoa. No,
And let's say const min person age is 0. So we're adding a bit more code, but now we are getting rid of these magical numbers. Age cannot be negative, good. And too old, that's good. So what I mean by these magic numbers in coding. So magic numbers are some sort of numbers that doesn't have a name. They just slipped into the code. So here, for example, we have something that is 42. That could be whatever. It could mean age or it could mean weeks in 1 year. But as we go down here, we notice that it actually means the deck size. So it means that the size of a card, or how many cards are in a deck of cards, for example. So now we have removed those magical numbers from here, and if we need it, we can easily change the values here. So let's allow people to have longer names, and let's allow a bit older people as well. And we could create our own function to get these values as well. We could return an object, but let's not do it right now. I think if there's no more questions, I'm gonna quit the stream here now. It was a good question that you had about the country, so thank you for that. And whenever you're coding, keep the console open. Iterate, try out things as you're writing. Don't write too much code without testing it out. And then test different edge cases. What if we had like something like this? Age is not a number now. Good. And how about now? Now it's a number, but it says that it cannot be negative. Good. So I'm gonna quit the stream today. Yes. As there's no more questions, and I think we've covered a lot today on this stream. Good luck on assignment 2. Remember, the deadline is on Sunday, and I'm gonna post this code to Gist again, and I'm gonna put the link into the description of the video. Alright, good luck with the assignment.